Hello. I've had 3 cups of coffee in the last 5 hours, and I defy you to stop me from having a 4th. Vampires, right? After a certain Sparkle vampire movie came out in the early 2000s, the amount of paranormal romances being published began to skyrocket. Shit became mainstream and it seemed like everyone was trying to get on that undead romance bandwagon in order to make a bit of that sweet, sweet coin. Paranormal romances were being adapted to film, there were fan fictions being written, books being published. I guess you could say people were craving to oversaturate the paranormal romance genre. They were, crushing the YA market with their coveted books about 100-year-old vampires courting teen girls with their charming personalities. Cherish. That was a really long-winded way of saying we're going to take a look at the Crave series today. Crave is a paranormal romance written by Tracy Wolff, who up until this point had purely written erotica. Crave was Tracy Wolff's first attempt at a real fantasy series, so when you put it like that, you have to give her some credit. Credit where credit's due. It's not that bad for a first series. That being said, this series gives me physical pain. If it weren't enough for the literal hundreds of chapter breaks, the main character's enough to drive almost anyone off a cliff, much like how the main character's parents were thrown off a cliff. The entire series has been written off time and time again as a blatant Twilight copycat by hundreds of reviewers who clearly did not finish the novel. I see people outraged that this book is a vampire romance, and I'm like, bro, did you not read the synopsis? Or read the title? Or see the book cover? And I'd like to say right off the bat that this book does look like a Twilight ripoff. I'm not saying that it doesn't. I'm just saying once you get to the second book, or even the end of this book, all similarities pretty much get thrown off a cliff. Much like how the main character's parents were thrown off a cliff. I'd actually go so far as to say that Crave has more in common with Netflix's Wednesday than it does with Twilight. And you might think I'm crazy, but I swear to God they're the exact same thing. No, today I will not be analyzing the similarities between Crave and Wednesday. Today I will be giving you an in-depth review of the plot and my brain thoughts on the process. Grace is our main character, and she's pretty much every YA protagonist fresh out of the female protagonist pipeline. Hey boss, the new YA protagonist just got in. She's in the back. Wanna come take a look at her? Yes, finally! Who is this? This ain't my protagonist. Where's my protagonist? I don't know. I've checked all the default options. Brown hair, brown eyes, pale as a ghost. Short, skinny, gigantic bazongas. Yeah, it's all right here. Plain? No. No, it looks like I checked conventionally attractive. Damn it, Nikki! I thought they were the same thing! They are! Grace's parents died a month ago whenever they... I don't really remember what happened to them. But now she's moving to Alaska to live with her Uncle Flynn and her cousin Macy. Her Uncle Flynn is in charge of Katmere Academy, which is a school for paranormals, but Grace doesn't know that yet. And rather than trying to explain it to her, they make this elaborate plan to have the whole school pretend to be human for the rest of the school year. Which kinda seems like a bit of an oversight on Uncle Finn's part. It feels like there's better ways than hinging your entire plan on trusting an entire school full of teenagers to keep a secret. But okay. When Grace arrives to her new school, she is immediately threatened by the hottest, baddest boy at school. So you just know this man's gotta be the love interest. His name is Jackson, with an X. And he's warning Grace that if she stays at the school, then she's probably gonna get killed. And dude, Grace is immediately smitten. A man who threatens my life? Say less. So she reaches out and cups his face and strokes the scar that's over his eye. And it was at this point, whenever I was reading the book for the first time, that I was like, I don't know about this. Because I don't know about you, but imagine you meet someone and the first thing they do is touch your face. Not just your face, the scar you were trying to hide from them. And they're just sitting there like, wow, this must have hurt. I guess.
Do you want to talk about it?
Not really. But no. Despite threatening her not even a minute ago, Jackson is super into it. He does the little, you lean into it. And then he fucking corners her into the wall to threaten her one more time before leaving. Ah, young love. And after that, Grace's cousin Macy has the second hottest guy in school, Flint, the first hottest guy in school being Jackson, of course. Macy has Flint take Grace up to her room. And by take Grace up to her room, I mean pick her up like a sack of potatoes and run up the 3 flights of stairs. Because this is a normal school with normal human interactions. Further proven later that night whenever Grace is walking around the castle grounds and 2 alpha bros come in from the outside without their jackets on. Which is weird, because what are they doing here? Shouldn't they be on their podcast set? But like true alpha bros, they hate women, and so they take this opportunity to push Grace out into the sub-freezing temperatures so she will die. They don't succeed because, woohoo, Jackson is here to save the day. He scares away the guys that try to pull the "it was just a prank hand," and they decide to blame the full moon for making them try to kill her. But now they're gone and Grace is safe, which is great, except it looks like her lip is bleeding a little bit from trying to fight them off, Hopefully Jackson, the vampire, doesn't do anything weird like, I don't know, wipe the blood off and lick it off his fingers, because that would be gross. But no. Grace thinks it is a super hot and super normal human thing that a normal human would do. And can I just say, if your love interest licks your blood off of their fingers, they have spawned straight out of a fan fiction, and you need to get out of there as fast as possible. That flag that he's waving is the same color as your blood, scarlet red. Get out of there! But now Jackson has gotten a taste of Grace's blood, and he's having a bit of a hard time controlling his thirst. Just like Grace, ayo! And so he sends her away before he can hurt her. And logically, it would make sense that Grace isn't like, oh, those guys were out in the cold? Oh. Yeah, they have to be werewolves. Yeah, werewolves exist. There's no other explanation. But as things start to get weirder, Grace thinks that there might be something amiss at Catmere Academy. Nothing much happens the next day, although Grace does go to a welcome party and she sees Jackson there when, he bites into a strawberry and it scares her so much that she runs away. I am not kidding. Ready? Okay. Eventually he lifts his gaze and looks straight at me. Then he raises the strawberry to his lips and bites it clean in half. No one told me this was a horror novel. Grace is so scared by the big bad strawberry man that she runs away all the way to the library, and she meets this girl named Leah. In the library. They go and get tea. They go and get tea. So they go and get tea together, and Leah tells Grace about how her boyfriend died like 6 months prior. And Grace relates to her grief because just like in the real world, there's no time limit on grief, and people telling you to just get over it doesn't actually do anything to heal the pain that is there. So Grace doesn't feel so alone anymore, which is great. It's Grace. That being said, Grace's cousin Macy is kind of freaking out right now because whenever the strawberry incident happened, Grace didn't really tell anyone where she was going. So Grace has to leave tea time early because of course she would. What do I even mean by of course she would? Grace has to leave so her cousin knows she's safe. Because of course she would. No, she goes home with Macy, and she starts feeling a little sick, but they blame it on the altitude sickness. But it's really just an excuse so that she can stay home from school a second time in this book. So she stays home and uses this as an excuse to explore the castle grounds again, and she runs into Leah and Jackson having a fight. Apparently, Jackson's brother was named Hudson, and he was the boyfriend of Leah the one that Leah was talking about who died. And Jackson may or may not have a little something to do with Hudson's death. But Jackson brings Grace inside, and she notices something a little strange. Jackson and Leah didn't have any jackets on. Not that surprising, we already know that they're vampires. Did I say vampires? I mean aliens, because that is immediately what Grace assumes they are. Keep in mind, she sees people from Alaska without jackets on and is immediately like, aliens are real. So Grace is invited to a snowball fight by Flint because she has never seen snow before, and they do what you normally do whenever you have a snowball fight and climb a tree. The tree branch breaks because a huge gust of wind comes by, and it's largely alluded that Flint had something to do with this gust of wind. So whenever Grace plummets to her death, Flint rescues her, and then Jackson comes by and is all like, "Oi, what do you think you're doing?" He's not was that a British accent? He's not British. Since Grace is hurt, Jackson carries her away, bridal style, to her room, and she has yet another excuse to not go to school in this book about going to school. So instead of going to class, Grace decides that she's going to text Jackson. The entire next day she spends just texting Jackson. He sends her breakfast. It's great. It's sweet. He sends her a book. And I'll give you a second to think. In this book, without nuance, about a human girl falling in love with a brooding vampire, what book do you think that the vampire love interest sends to said human girl? What is Twilight? Actually, that is incorrect. It is Stephen King's The Shining, with a little note that says, "This could be us. XOXO." Just kidding. Of course it's Twilight. It takes 200 pages for them to finally let Grace go to class. And if that was any indication on the importance of Grace's education, according to this book, we practically skip over everything that happens in them. Flint offers to show Grace a shortcut to her art class and takes her to a dungeon. But it's okay, because it turns out the dungeon he locked the two of them in was actually just the entrance to the shortcut. You know, I guess he could have told her that before locking her in a prison cell with a complete stranger, but, you know, hindsight is 20/20. Just like this book, because it was released in 2020. Leah pops up and confirms that no, Flint wasn't trying to be creepy. He just forgot that the shortcut looks exactly like a dungeon. The three of them walk together, and by walk I mean run, because there's suddenly an earthquake shaking the whole earth. And when it finally stops, they get to the other end of the tunnel and find Jackson waiting for Grace. He is upset that Grace is just kind of chilling with Flint because he knows, and Grace doesn't, that Flint is actively trying to kill her. And the only reason she survived the fall during the snowball fight is because he used his powers to throw Flint underneath her. Did I say that Flint broke Grace's fall? I can't remember. Flint broke Grace's fall during the snowball fight, but it was actually Jackson who used his telekinesis to fling Flint underneath her. Yeah, but understandably, Grace just thinks Jackson is trying to be possessive of her, so she tells him off, and then Flint is like, "Yeah, fuck you, Jackson." And she's like, "You know what, fuck you too, Flint." It wasn't until after class that Grace realizes that Jackson had been texting her the entire time, asking her if she was okay during the earthquake. And since the last person she was seen with was the most recent person who tried to kill her, Jackson got a little freaked out when she didn't respond. Grace kind of feels bad now, and all of her feelings about everything that she's been suppressing start leaking out of her nose. She finds a little cove that she has a good sit down and cry in. But surprise, surprise, the cove belongs to Jackson, and it's actually the entrance to his bedroom. So he's like, do you want to come in? And so they do the only thing you can do after having a panic attack and start making out. Obviously, there is nothing hotter than being emotionally exhausted and dehydrated after feeling like the world is about to end. That's why people with anxiety disorders are known for being promiscuous. I mean, look at me. I'm a stud. These baby blues after I've had a panic attack? Irresistible, man. And this is something I've been wanting to say, but I can't quite fit it in anywhere. But throughout this book, I think Grace is supposed to be representative of someone with an anxiety disorder. And I know that everyone's anxiety manifests differently, but Grace's therapist has got to be a god. Because she is constantly talking about having anxiety, but she never actually has it. She'll just be like, I feel myself on the verge of a panic attack, and I remember what my therapist told me. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, out. And boom, she's fixed just like that. Doesn't matter how bad it gets, she always remembers what her therapist told her, and it always works. And here, right afterwards, she's in the mood to make out with Jackson? Sure, there's some dialogue and a break in there, but it's just so weird to go from sobbing to making out in like 2 chapters. Meanwhile, I'm over here having panic attacks in my sleep because my brain realized, hey, you can't take your anti-anxiety medication if you're not awake to see it coming. I think the last thing on my mind after crying and hyperventilating over my dead parents that I'm not done grieving over would be to kiss the cute boy that I met 4 days ago. Tracy Wolff doesn't quite capture the end of the world panic from the smallest inconveniences that happen whenever you're having an anxiety attack, and it makes me mad. Come on, if you're going to give us a character with anxiety, go all out, man. Don't just have her sitting there being like, I feel my anxiety, and I let it go. Jackson, that's not how it works. Someone give me a protagonist who starts hyperventilating and feels like the world is gonna end because they cut a piece of paper crooked. Because that's what I want. That is true representation, and it is not based on a true story. Well, they're smooching, an earthquake happens again, and glass breaks, it's flying everywhere, Grace gets hit, fade to black. The end. I wish, we're only halfway through. I'm trying to be quick, but I just have so much to say. Grace wakes up in the infirmary with a bandage on her neck, and the nurse is like, okay, don't take it off now, you hear? So of course Grace immediately does, and she has 2 little puncture holes on her neck. But everything is not what it seems, because you might assume that it was Jackson who bit her after her blood was spraying everywhere from the broken window, but it was actually the nurse, because her vampire venom has healing properties. You know, if vampires have venom, does that mean they can be milked? Isn't that what it's called? Yeah. Snake milking. Like, whenever you milk a snake for their venom, so you could get their venom and make an antidote with it. Does that mean they can make a vampire antidote? Wait. In Breaking Dawn, Edward literally has his vampire venom. Does that mean he milked himself? The image of Edward doing the little snake thing over the cup is so funny to me. That's so weird. Why don't we ever talk about that? I mean, why would we? But, you know, I'm asking the important questions here. Anyway, back to the story. The nurse bit Grace so that she could heal her, and now the cat's out of the bag, and Grace finds out that Catmere Academy is a school for vampires, witches, werewolves, and dragons. Surprising it was the adult that let it loose that vampires exist instead of the entire school full of teenagers, but okay. Grace finds out that she was actually supposed to be a witch, but her dad pulled the old Wizards of Waverly Place, and whenever he fell in love with a human, he gave up his powers. And they just never told Grace for some reason. Grace lost a lot of blood, so she is excused from going to class. Again. For the 4th time. Instead, she goes to get something to eat with buddy old pal Flint. And do you know that trope whenever there's like the rope and like the person is holding a piano over the other person? They're like standing beneath the piano and they like bing, and then the piano falls on top of it. Flint essentially does the exact same thing, but it's with a chandelier.
Yeah, I'll get you some food. Just wait right, here. What are you looking at? Nothing, is that a chandelier? No. Why are you giving a thumbs up to the guy holding that rope that's attached to the chandelier? Oh, no reason. I'm just gonna go get your food. Just wait right here. I'll be right back.
Luckily, Jackson is there to swoop her away, and Grace is like, please, don't be mad at him. It was an accident. And Jackson's like, hey, man, chandeliers don't fall by accident. And now that she finally knows about the paranormal side of the school, he can finally tell her that people are trying to kill her. Specifically, Flint. Since it was a two-person job, Jackson finds out the person who actually dropped the chandelier. He just so happens to be the werewolf alpha. So he makes this big ordeal of fighting the alpha, drinking his blood, so that no one ever bothers Grace again. Grace follows Jackson to his room in the tower, and he's brooding because he's Jackson. And I guess to prove that Grace isn't scared of him after the whole thing happened, she lets him bite her. And then we find out the reason that Leah blames Jackson for his brother's death, and it's because he literally killed his own brother. Apparently Hudson was just, a regular guy. He believed that born vampires were the superior race, and used his powers, which would convince anyone to do anything he told them to force people to commit mass unaliving of the species which he deemed inferior. It's around this point in time whenever a lot of reviewers are like, Grace, why are you still going after Jackson? He just admitted to killing his own brother. He's a bad person. Why are you still interested in him? But considering the person that he killed was basically a vampire dictator, I'm gonna give him a pass. Just a little one. Jackson took it upon himself to get rid of the guy who was going to start the Third Great War among the paranormals, even though it meant killing his brother. And now he feels like if he isn't in control of a situation or seen as a force to be reckoned with, the already fragile race relations in this world are just going to completely unravel and the Third War will begin. Which is some pretty heavy stuff. So do you know what they do next? Anyone?
Yes, Gray? Do they make out? Yes. Yes, that's right. They make out. Yes. I knew it. I'm really proud of you, buddy. Really? Yeah. I really am. Thank you.
Why is the YA solution to everything making out with people you just met? Also, Grace, you are skipping school today because you almost died from blood loss 24 hours ago. What are you doing gallivanting about? Go home! So, Grace confronts Flint at some point, and Flint is like, okay, yeah, maybe I was trying to kill you, but I had a really good reason to. So, of course, whenever Flint tries to be like, yeah, let's have a one-on-one conversation, I'll explain my really good reason for trying to murder you. She says no, because why would she say yes, Flint? Give me one reason. Anyway, she goes on a date with Jackson, and he uses his telekinesis powers to float them into the air so they can dance among the Aurora Borealis. Which, theoretically, sounds super romantic, but if you really think about it, I feel like it would be awful. Okay, picture this. You're suspended in the air, in the freezing cold. You're wearing a dress. All you can see is purple and green, and you don't even know how to dance. All you can hear is wind, which means there's no music playing. And then what? And then this asshole starts trying to spin you while you're dancing? How does that even work? He's using his telekinesis. Does he just spin you in the air with his mind? Yeah, beautiful, bro. Freezing my ass off over jagged rocks while you spin me in the air like a rotisserie chicken? Nah, not for me. Just wait on the balcony in the freezing cold to not see anything and go home disappointed like the rest of us. You dorks. Grace is cold, like I said she would be, and so they go inside, drink some tea that Leah had brought for them, and can you guess what they do? Let's say it together, class. They make out. They make out. They make out. Jackson starts drinking her blood again, and she is super into it. But he can't really stop himself for some reason, and she's about to shrivel up like a raisin. Damn. He should have said Grace. Grace blacks out, and whenever she wakes up, Jackson is going feral, and he's like, get out of here! So she starts wobbling down the stairs, trying to get out. Leah pops up, she just starts kicking the shit out of her. And then she pulls out a gun, shoots Jackson, and is like, I knew I should have made the tea stronger. No worries. Pew, pew. And then she shoots Grace, too. Grace wakes up tied to an altar. As you do. And it's around now you might be asking yourself, why? Well, you see, gentle viewer, the answer is quite simple. I don't really know. Essentially, Leah was planning on bringing Hudson back to life by sacrificing Grace because Grace is Jackson's mate. So Leah killed Grace's parents so that she would move to Alaska so that she could sacrifice Grace so that she could bring Hudson back. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Let me tell you, this is where we really go from 0 to 1,000 in this book. Basically, the rest of this book is Flint trying to kill Grace so that Hudson can't be brought back to life. Leah trying to kill Grace so that Hudson can be brought back to life. Jackson trying to stop Grace from dying. And Grace just trying to survive. It is a huge mess. And I completely glazed over while I was reading it because the entire time it was like, these people are fighting, and then these people are fighting, and oh no, Grace is in pain again. But I will do my best to relay what happened to you as fast as I can. Grace is tied to an altar, and she kind of does the squee squoo, squee squoo to get her wrist out of the bindings. Leah goes after her, but Flint, who's a dragon, by the way, I think I forgot to mention he's a dragon. Flint captures Grace with his claws, turns into his human form so that he can choke her to death. He is a fire-breathing dragon, so I don't know why he went that direction. I do think there are easier and faster ways to kill someone, but go off. So he fails, obviously. And Jackson comes by, and I think Jackson fights with Flint. Leah grabs Grace and brings her back to the altar room. Jackson wins his fight with Flint, and then Leah and Grace kind of tussle. And Jackson can't get in because the door is locked, and they play by the old vampire rule of you have to be invited in order to come into a room. While Leah and Grace are fighting, Hudson comes back in the form of a smoke plume. Don't ask me how the human sacrifice didn't require the human to be sacrificed, but we're just going with it. Jackson breaks the wall so that he can come in because if there... My neighbor's here. Jackson breaks the wall down and now he can enter because if there isn't a door, he doesn't need permission to enter the room. He fights Smoke Plume Hudson and essentially Rasengans him into a little ball and then throws the ball at Leah, and then Leah poofs into dust. We are so close to being done. Jackson is spent because he used too much magic, so Grace gives him his blood and passes out because this is the third time in about 48 hours that she has almost died from blood loss. She wakes up in the infirmary and everything is just fine. And whenever they're walking to class, Grace sees a human version of Hudson and he swings a sword at Jackson, and so Grace jumps in the way, turns into stone, and saves Jackson. And that's it. So basically just Twilight. Now you might be confused, but that's what we call a plot twist, baby. Grace wasn't human at all. In fact, she was a gargoyle the entire time. And now she is trapped in stone with Hudson, and no one knows how to get her out. And that's the book. The end. My personal favorite part of New Moon is whenever Edward's evil brother comes back to life and then Bella joins the cast of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I honestly think the majority of the hate that comes from this series is from people who go into it expecting it to be a Twilight ripoff, so they're immediately starting to compare it to Twilight, and it just is disappointing whenever it doesn't reach those expectations. On its own, this book stands up just fine. I mean, I think people would be a lot less hard on it if they didn't go into it expecting it to be bad. And I actually really like Jackson as a love interest, especially for like this genre. You can get really crappy love interests. He can be a bit overprotective sometimes, but given the circumstances, I can kind of see where it's coming from. He's not like Edward, where he's stalking her or watching her sleep just in case she might need him. No, people are consistently trying to kill Grace. It makes sense that he doesn't want her to go places alone. And other than the occasional moment whenever he, accidentally almost kills her, whenever he's a bit overbearing, she will call him out, he'll listen, and, that's good. It's a glitch. Also, I just wanted to slide this in there. I saw a review of someone talking about how Jackson admits that he's a stalker, and I have read this book 3 times, and I am so sorry to admit that I have read this book 3 times, but I do not remember this line, so I don't know if my memory is wrong or if they're wrong, but once again, I don't think of him as a stalker. If she tells him to stop, he stops, People critique it saying that there's no plot, but let's not confuse a bad plot for no plot, because there is a difference. This book actually fits fairly well into the 3-act story structure and has a character arc that is being progressed towards for almost the entirety of the book. The entire book is about Grace learning to love again after shutting everyone out because she was too scared to lose people. Is there any nuance? No. But does she have more of a character arc than a certain protagonist from a much more popular, much higher rated fairy romance series? Yes. And yeah, this book could have been 200 pages shorter, and an editor probably could have pointed out the obscene amount of times that Tracy Wolff uses the term "for a second, just a second." I cannot tell you guys how many times that she uses this phrase. You'll think that there is no way she's going to use that phrase again. And then boom, there it is. I lost count at 11 times. That is too many times for one book. And that's not even counting the amount of times that she says 4 long seconds, which I also lost count at 11 times. Just how many seconds are in this book? 83 in the sample? We have 1.5 minutes of seconds in this book? Dear God. I'm gonna need a second. Just a second before I read the next book. Well, I guess that's all. If you need me, I will be spinning around the sky on my finger like a rotisserie chicken. See ya.
The kind of eats, the kind of red-hot treats, the kind of sticky, licky sweets I crave.